So, we are in the 7th chapter, Gospel of John, and we're going to be looking at verses 25 to 31 today. 25 to 31. Let me read them for you, and then we'll see what we can learn. It says, "Then said some of them of Jerusalem." Now, you remember, Jesus had been in Galilee. It was the festival. I just lost the name. Which festival was it? Thank you. Yes, Tabernacles. His brothers was giving him a bad time. You need to go. You need to go. And he kept telling them, "No, I'm not going to go right now." As soon as they left, then he came in incognito behind them and went to the festival himself. And now in this section here, he at one point he begins to make himself known, and he's really going to make himself known in a big way as a part of this section that we're reading today. So he's there, he's in Judea, he's in Jerusalem, and it says that some of them of Jerusalem, they were saying what? "Is not this he whom they seek to kill?" So that tells us some things. We can deduce several key facts or ideas from that. Let's continue to read. "But lo, he speaketh boldly," or way out in the open. He's not concealing himself. "And they say nothing to him. Do the rulers know indeed that this is the very Christ?" Okay. Verse 27, "Howbeit we know this man whence he is. But when Christ comes, no man knoweth where or whence he is. Then cried Jesus in the temple as he taught, saying, Ye both know me, and ye know whence I am. And I am not come of myself, but he that sent me is true, whom you know not. But I know him, for I am from him, and he hath sent me." Then they sought to take him, but no man laid hands on him, because his hour was not yet come. And many of the people believed on him, and said, "When Christ comes, will he do more miracles than these which this man has done?" Okay, so there we have it. What we've got here, as you look into this, we've got three groups of people. And I've entitled these three groups the committed group, the confused group, and the convinced group. Now, we're not going to take them in the order of the verses as the verses was laid out. We're actually going to, that first group that we call the committed group, we're going to take them first, and those verses are actually in verses 28 to 30. Okay? So the committed group is verses 28 to 30. And when we read those verses, you would first think that the committed group would be positive towards Jesus. But in this case today, it's the opposite. So we're going to say that the committed group, the most committed group concerning Jesus, were committed to silencing him at all costs. They wanted to shut him up. What were they willing to do? To what length were they willing to go to shut Jesus up? They were going to kill him. Whatever it takes. Now, I can't help but be reminded of some things that are going on in current events right now. Can somebody let Nancy in the back? Oh, it is open. Okay. So, pardon me, but one of the things that I I guess I've always known this, but now it is so glaringly obvious. There will not be peace in Israel. There will not be. From 1948, you remember 1948? It's when Israel became a nation again. The Jews had already been coming into the Palestine region. The Arabs were offered a nation. At that time, the Jews were willing to give them a nation, and they refused it and attacked Israel instead. So, I mean, literally, from the moment the Jewish nation was declared a nation, they were attacked on just about every front. They have been offered, over the years, different deals that America has pushed in a lot of ways on Israel to allow statehood for the Palestinian people. And what do the Palestinian people keep doing? Rejecting it. You remember the PLO? Who was the leader of the PLO? Arafat, Yasser Arafat. He was offered the deal, and they refused it. So you've got the West Bank and you've got the Gaza Strip, both Palestinian Muslim areas, and the Gaza is a community. I forget. Anybody remember how many millions of people were living in that little narrow strip? 2 million. Yeah. And the Jews were pretty much hands off, but every time a peace negotiations tried to get going, usually by outside parties, and America was always involved, the Jews were asked, the nation of Israel were asked to make a lot of concessions, and it never happened. Why? Because they hate the Jews. They don't even recognize the right for Israel to exist as a nation. And they have one goal, and that's to wipe them off the face of the earth. And they are not going to budge off of that. And this comes right back to biblical prophecy about that. So we should be praying for peace, obviously, but on the other hand, we need to know that, I remember my first recollection of this great achievement was during the administration of Jimmy Carter. And he brought together Menachem Begin, who was the prime minister of Israel at the time. Anybody remember who the Arab representative was at that time? Sadat, president of Egypt. They came to America, and they met at Camp David, and they hammered out the peace accord. And they stood together, Carter in the middle, Sadat and Begin, and they shook hands, and they quoted scripture about beating the swords into plowshares and all these other things. It was a great achievement. What did it give Sadat in the end? Assassinated. Because the people would not accept any peace accord with that. This goes all the way back to some mistakes that Abraham and Sarah made. Goes all the way back, and it's not going to change. And so now we're seeing, finally, Israel saying, okay, that's it. That's enough. And they are going to attempt, we'll all have to wait and see what happens. They're going to attempt to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. And that's going to be a challenge. And the world is going to convince or increasingly turn against them in this effort. So that's my political speech that I'm sorry I just felt compelled to do. But here is the thing. What does this have to do with today's lesson? Jesus was no less of a threat, but now it's Jesus a Jew to the power broker Jews. And they were willing to do anything to silence Jesus. Now, I want to play for you a provocative. Honestly, I was wondering, should I do this or not? I'm going to do it. Because guess what? I'm going to do it. Okay. Watch this. I hope we get sound.
Rebel took to the streets. He recruited others to join him. They quit their jobs, left their families, and swore allegiance to him. They roamed the hood, challenged authority, and made a lot of people uneasy. Community leaders feared them. Religious leaders abhorred them. Law enforcement labeled them outlaws. We have to shut them down, they said. Get them off the streets. Protect our communities from these troublemakers. But they weren't part of a gang spreading hate and terror. They were spreading love.
Pretty provocative, isn't it? I would venture that some people would go, wow, I don't like that. So what was the dynamic that was going on that they brought to modern times? What was that all about? What was Jesus to? He was a threat. Was he provocative? You betcha. He was provocative. The people that he chose to use to follow him, were they upstanding citizens? No, they were not.
They were fishermen that Lois.
Yeah. They didn't have the six-figure jobs. They were eking out a living. They were not highly thought of. And these are the people that these Jewish leaders saw, and of course the multitudes. And how do you think those Jewish leaders thought about the multitudes of people that were being attracted to Jesus Christ? What did they think of them? What's that?
They thought they were a threat, I think.
Okay, yeah. What did they think of them just in their society, in their culture? They looked down on them. They were the deplorables. The first century deplorables. Thank you. I didn't have to say it. Hanging on to their, what was the other thing? Hanging on to their Bibles and their guns. Was that the other statement that was made by somebody? So that's the point. The committed group were committed to shut him up. Look at the two verses that I've got there for you as just ones that we've already looked at in John. John 5:16. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. How dare you heal anybody on the Sabbath day? Terrible, terrible. John 5:18. Therefore the Jews sought the more to kill him, because he not only had broken the Sabbath, but he said also that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. Wow. Blasphemy, which is exactly what they ultimately used to arrest, try, and convict him. Blasphemy, right? Chapter 7 and verse 1. Let's see where we're at. Chapter 7 and verse 1. After these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he would not walk in Jewry or Judea, because the Jews sought to kill him. So I want you to try to get maybe a little better appreciation about how dangerous it was for Jesus and his followers, but how dangerous it was to him and what he represented to the power brokers. The elite. The elite. You know, we've gotten used to calling our power brokers and our elite different names in our country. What are some of the names we call our power elite brokers? The swamp. Yeah. And what was the other one? There's another one that politicians have used that I can't think of it right now. That talks about the well, yeah, 1% was kind of a different time framework, but yeah, that's true also. So anyway, this was intense. It was basically war. And it's amazing how that Jesus was not arrested and killed already. And the only reason he was not is because of who he was. And he was not yet had finished accomplishing what he knew the Father wanted him to accomplish. So, and they are without excuse. It's interesting how scriptures many times go to the lengths of pointing out the fact that not all Pharisees thought the same way. How do we know that? Nicodemus. Not all Pharisees thought the same way. So this brings up to the idea that they had the knowledge. Any of the Pharisees could have put all the prophecies together and seen the truth of those prophecies in the person of Jesus of Nazareth and accepted him. That was entirely possible. Nicodemus was the example of that. He came to Jesus. Let's read that again. Chapter 3, first 2 verses. John chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. So there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. And that's actually more closely translated, the ruler and teacher of the Jews. This guy had some weight. He had some authority. So he comes to Jesus, verse 2, by night, and he says to him, right off the bat, he makes an admission because he saw what Jesus was doing. And he recognized the truth. He said, Rabbi or teacher, we know. Wow. We don't think. And he included others. We, wasn't just him. We know that thou art a teacher come from God. Because, why? For no man can do what you are doing except God be with him. He saw it. He believed it. It was obvious to him. It was in his face. And he came, although he was scared to do it, right? He comes by night. He came to Jesus seeking what Jesus had. I personally believe that Nicodemus at some point became a true believer in Jesus Christ. Wasn't he involved in actually helping with the body of Jesus? Yeah, that was Joseph's tomb. I think Nicodemus was involved in helping get that body secured. So anyway, here we are. The committed people that were committed to the destruction, the killing, the murder, in order to silence the message of Jesus Christ. They rejected him because he offended them. Jesus did not pull any punches. He got in their faces. The most stinging pronouncements and statements of Jesus Christ against people that he came in contact with during his ministry were the Pharisees. He called them names. You know, people get upset, and I'll be honest with you, so do I when Trump calls people names. Jesus called them names. What did he call the Pharisees? Whitewashed sepulchres, which on the inside are full of dead men's bones. What did that represent? Dead men's bones, contaminated, right? You don't go in. But on the outside, oh, they look so nice and whitewashed, clean. What else did he call them? Hypocrites. To their face. He didn't talk about them behind their backs. Hypocrites. What else? Snakes. He called them snakes. He to their face said, you are of your father, the devil. Wow, is right.
So it was on, yeah.
It was on. Absolutely. Do you think part of the reason why, again, I don't know. I'm not Jesus. I wasn't there. But I wonder, part of the reason why he had those harsh words was so that they would despise him, hate him, and want him dead. He knew, Jesus knew. Yeah, he knew where he was going. He knew what was going to happen. So, hey, he's doing everything he can by speaking the truth. You don't throw accusations and call people names that are false. He spoke the truth. And by that ensured the fact that the Jews would be so upset at him that ultimately they would demand that he be crucified. So there is the first group, the committed group. Verse 28 to 30, when Jesus was crying at the last day of the festival, the last day, he's crying out. That's literally yelling as loud as he can. And he's saying in the temple, you both know me, and you know whence I am. And I am not come of myself, but he that sent me is true, whom you know not. You don't have a true relationship with the Father like I do. I know the Father. I know where I came from. He's the one that sent me. But he says, but I know him, for I am from him, and he has sent me. And after he said that, guess what? They wanted to kill him all the more. And yet somehow they couldn't get their hands on him. Now, let's see. I think it's when I'm preparing these lessons, I get a little bit ahead. Yeah, I think it's in the next section, next week when we do it, where they kind of develop a plan. So we won't go there right now. But here's the commitment that they had. They wanted to silence him up, shut him up by whatever means necessary. Okay, how about the confused group? What were they confused about? You find that in verses 25 to 27. So, can anybody remember as we read that, what were this group of people confused about?
Who Jesus really was?
Yeah, because they were trying to balance two ideas or two things that they saw. Let's look again, verse 25. It says, then said some of them of Jerusalem, is this not he whom they seek to kill? Now, who's they? The Pharisees, the Jews, yeah, the hierarchy, okay? Isn't this the guy that they're looking to kill? And yet, verse 26 says, he's out there in the open. He's not scared of them at all. He's talking. He's letting everybody say. He's speaking boldly or openly. And they don't say anything to him. These guys had the power to arrest him. They had the power to orchestrate exactly what ended up happening at the end of his ministry. But they didn't do it. And so then, what was their speculation? What's the last statement in that verse? Do they think? They, the Pharisees, the chief priests, the priests, all those guys, do they think he's actually the Messiah? Why else wouldn't they not arrest him? Why else would they not silence him? And so here's this confusion. They say they want to arrest him. Here he is. He's out in the open. And yet they're not. So does that mean that they actually really believe that Jesus is the Messiah? But then they say, this is part of their whole confusion. Then they say, where is it? Verse 27, howbeit we know this man whence he is. What are they talking about there? They knew Jesus of Nazareth. They knew he came from Nazareth. They knew he grew up in Nazareth. And Nazareth was not Washington, D.C. Right? Lowly town, poor. Didn't come from any, of no account, really. And so, hey, they said, listen, but we know this man. But when Christ comes, so now here's their understanding. When Christ, the Messiah, you read the word Christ and it's Messiah. When Christ comes, no man knows whence he is. In other words, he comes out of nowhere. And that's what we got in the outline there. The confused group, they knew Jesus, the man. Now in these verses, Matthew 13, Mark 6, Luke 4, it's talking about, alluding to this fact that they knew who Jesus of Nazareth was. All those support that idea. Okay? So they knew who Jesus of Nazareth was, but guess what? That actually became a stumbling block for them. What did Jesus say one time as he was trying to minister to the people in Galilee? The people closest to his own hometown. What did he say? Say that again?
They were the hardest to convince.
Yeah. And in fact, Jesus actually curtailed his ministry in Galilee because of that. What does it say? A prophet, what? No honor in his hometown. So the fact that they were unwilling to recognize this guy that they saw grow up, now he's claiming to be Messiah, coming from God, and eventually going back to God the Father. They are unwilling to accept that fact. And so that was the stumbling block for them. Even, as we've already learned, his own brothers did not believe it. At this point in time, they did not believe it. They ultimately would, but right now, no. So it was a stumbling block for the confused group. We know this guy, It'd be like somebody that you knew from a baby growing up and then suddenly deciding one day, hey, I'm the Messiah. Give me a break. You need to get on some meds, or if you're on meds, you need to get off meds, whatever, This does not compute, so to speak. So they thought the Messiah would come out of nowhere. We shouldn't be able to know when this guy, when and where he's born. And then others talked about the fact that, hey, he's from Nazareth, but the prophecies talk about, the line of David and all that stuff. So they obviously weren't all that familiar with all the prophecies.
Is that because the Pharisees didn't teach that?
Yeah.
Because they had Isaiah.
Yeah. I think you're right for the most part, because there's a certain religion that exists right now that would rather their people not read the Bible. And they go under the Christian banner. They don't want them to read the Bible. Why? That's not your job. It's the priest's job. And it was kind of like that back then. You're not smart enough. You can't read the Bible and take the truth of it on its face value. You need to have a higher education. You need to have some letters behind your name in order to be able to interpret the scriptures. So yeah, the people, they knew some stuff, but they didn't know near as much as a committed Pharisee or a scribe, especially a scribe did. Okay. They didn't know enough of the truth. I'm always if I go to the doctor or whatever, and they're talking to me about something that's going on, and I warn them. I said, listen, I was a paramedic for 30 years. I don't say that to impress them. I say that to warn them. He says, what does that mean? That means I have a little knowledge, and that makes me dangerous. Yeah. So you need to tell me my thinking. And I have really great conversations with one particular doctor I have that I've never even met. It's always a phone thing. And she's the one that is taking care of me with my diabetes. And I have great conversations with her, and I'm very upfront. And I told her for many, many years, I do not want to go on insulin. I don't believe that insulin is the cure for diabetes. In fact, it makes it worse. And she listened to me. And she said, all right, well, let's see if we can keep you off of insulin or whatever, because low blood sugar is not the end all. That's just a symptom of the disease. The disease is metabolic disease, and it's something else that's going on. So anyway, but she knows, okay, this guy's got a little bit of knowledge, so he's dangerous. So they didn't have enough of the truth. They had a little bit. And, it wasn't enough for them to make these bold pronunciations that were absolutely accurate about Jesus Christ. On the other hand, they saw the power and the authority of his words. Same group, the confused group. They saw the power and authority. In verse 27, no, not verse 27, but it was before that when they were talking about, hey, here he is, speaking openly and boldly. What was one of the trademarks that people, even the average Joe kind of person that listened to Jesus Christ, we're told this on more than one occasion in the Gospels, that he spoke with authority. Authority. Not as a scribe or a Pharisee. In that scenario, when I'm standing up and talking to you about things, I know sometimes I just put my personal opinion out there, but I know I've got to be careful about that. I'm more of a scribe and a Pharisee. I don't speak with my own authority. I speak with the authority of God's word. And that's what the scribes and the Pharisees were supposed to do. They didn't speak with their own authority. They spoke with what they had at that point in time in the Old Testament scriptures. But Jesus didn't need that. Now, he did not transgress anything that was in the Old Testament scriptures. And in fact, he fulfilled all the Old Testament prophecies of him. But he did not have to, what do authors do? If they make a statement of fact if they're writing a book. And a lot of times, what do they have to do in that book? Footnotes. They have to reference. I say this in my book, and my reference, supporting evidence is listed down at the bottom of the page or in the back of the book someplace. So that's the kind of idea, anyway, that's going on here. So what did this all amount to? It amounted to the fact that it made them very confused. We don't think this guy's the Messiah, and yet here he is talking, and they say they want to get rid of him, and they're not. Confusing. And then there is the more not stupid crowd, simple. The simple crowd. What is, for some reason, I've got all these, the news, Bill O'Reilly. If anybody's ever watched Bill O'Reilly, he always says, I'm a simple man. He boils down issues to a simple truth. Most of the time I go, yeah, okay, I can see that. The simple crowd was what? They were the ones, I had one more line there. So they saw that he hadn't even been arrested yet. Verse 26, the last part of that. So we talked about it. Okay. So the last group is the convinced. Hey, it's simple. What was simple in their minds? Before we read the verse, what was just simple? He what? That's right. It's right there in the outline. That's right. They saw what Jesus was able to do. Now, what do you think they were referring to? Miracles, yeah. Healing, right? And the reason Jesus did a lot of healings was multifaceted. He had real sympathy and compassion for people. That's obvious. You know, Jesus, one time, he saw a funeral traveling down the road, headed to the cemetery. And the scriptures say that when he saw that, he had compassion on the people that were obviously sorrowing, wailing, probably. And so he literally stops the funeral procession and commands the guy to come out of the casket. And he does. Sympathy. He had sympathy. So he did miracles because of that. But he also did miracles as proof of who he was. Proof of who he was. Now, you know, there are some people that believe in miracles in a way in which, you know, I believe in miracles today, 2023. God can perform any miracle that he wants to perform at any time. And I've seen a few things in my lifetime that you might want to just put in the classification of a miracle. But I don't believe that God uses people to perform miracles like the way it was happening during his ministry and pretty much in the first century. In the first century, the apostles were empowered. The apostles also healed people, even raised people from the dead. And I don't do that. I was having a conversation with a guy once that believed in that stuff, you know. He said, I've seen people raised from the dead. And I go, wow, okay. So you really think that's possible? Yeah. I said, okay. We were volunteering at a first aid booth. I said, when we get out of here, let's go right over, which is in Napa, let's go right over to Queen of the Valley Hospital. We'll start on the first floor, and you can heal everybody one at a time. It's not, you know, the claims that people have today is not the same as the true gift that was in the first century. So we don't need that anymore. We have the completed record of who Jesus was. And you know what? In a way, Jesus said we're more blessed. What am I thinking of here? Anybody know where I'm going with that? We're more blessed now than if we had been with Jesus. Yeah. Thomas was, and there's where the statement came from. Doubting Thomas, right? What did Jesus tell Thomas right at the end of that conversation? Thomas, you believe because you saw. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. We're more blessed. We didn't witness it, but we can read about it and by faith accept the truth of who Jesus was and everything that he did. And that's powerful. So the group of convinced, they simply saw the works of Jesus, the miracles, as proof of his authenticity. Simple. You know, I've said many times, salvation is a simple message. So why is it so hard for some people to be saved? Salvation's a simple message. Yeah? So salvation is simple, but it's not easy. There's a difference. Some people would accuse me because of my theological stance on these issues that I believe in what is referred to as quote-unquote easy believism. Because I've stood here, I don't know how many times and told you already, and this book of John is the crown jewel of answering the question, how do I have eternal life? Believe. Don't add anything else to that. Does it have to be real belief? Absolutely, obviously. Pure or whatever else you want to believe? Yeah, it does. But it's belief. I don't have to believe and get baptized. I don't have to believe and be a good person after that. I truly believe and that's it. It's done. Some people call that easy believism, right? It's simple, but it's not easy. Why is being saved for some people not easy at all?
Because they can't see it. They can't,
Okay,
can't see what he's doing. They can't see him.
okay, yeah. There are circumstances in people's lives that make it harder for some people to believe than others. Do you remember somebody that came to Jesus with this kind of conversation? And Jesus made some pretty amazing pronouncements. He told the guy, he was a rich guy. He told the guy, go sell everything that you have and come follow me. The guy didn't want to do it. In another place, he said, how hard is it for a rich man to enter heaven? Why is it harder for a rich man to enter heaven?
Because he can buy what he wants.
Yeah. And he feels self-sufficient with his riches. And so he's it's harder for him, to accept that. Yeah.
Like in the parable of the sower.
Yeah.
The thorns choke.
Sure.
The deceitfulness of riches.
Deceitfulness of riches. Perfect. Yeah. Exactly. Wow. So, easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into the kingdom, right? Why? Because he's dependent upon his own riches. And it's harder for him to let go of those.
You're raised in a different religion.
Yeah, sure. Overcome the cultural barriers. Yeah. There's a lot of reasons why it's simple, but not necessarily easy. But nobody is without excuse. Everybody's given the opportunity. How? I don't know. That's God's job. But everybody's given that opportunity. Okay, this was the overriding factor for them. They saw the miracles and they simply said, who could do anything more than this guy has already done? He must be the Messiah. And that was it. They were the convinced because they were simple. Nobody could do. They were basically saying the same thing that Nicodemus said to Jesus, right? We know that nobody can do the things that you're doing unless God is with him. And the people saw that. And it says many believed. So there we are. Yes, Sharon.
I would think that a lot of people confuse understanding and belief. Because they say, well, I just don't understand this, so I don't. And it really does, in my own family, it takes them away from Christ because they just don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, and that speaks to what the Apostle Paul talked about. Yesterday we had this class, and part of what we were talking about is the natural man and the spiritual man. The natural man does not understand the things of God because they are spiritually discerned. So, how does God do that? There are some people that believe, I am not one of them, that there's a fancy theological word called regeneration. Do you know what that means, to be regenerated? It means you're dead and you're made to come alive. Regenerated. Okay? Some people believe that God regenerates the person first. And because of that, they can believe and be saved. I don't think he regenerates anybody first. But I do believe that God is at work in everybody's life. Think about yourself. Isn't it obvious that God was at work in your life in whatever ways things happen to bring you to a time and a place where you were ready to go, yes, the gospel is the truth. God's Spirit convicted you that it was the truth, and you had the opportunity then to believe. And I think that's what God does for everybody. I don't understand how that works, how he does it for everybody, but I have to believe that that's true. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Prayer requests, announcements. Sharon.
I'd like to pray for my nephew John. He's the one that got in that accident last year. He's having some really emotional and psychological difficulties.
Okay.
And also for the death of the football coach yesterday.
Yeah, I read that.
Kids are,
Ugh,
he died in front of the kids. And
that was Wilsey Wood, right?
Wolsey was the football coach, has a Saturday morning meeting, and he had a heart attack in front of the kids. And died. He was not even 45. And
Yeah.
last night they had a vigil on the football field. I know he was a coach for my son, my grandson Elijah,
Yeah.
in 8th grade. So I just, you pray for the family, but for those kids to see this, that they're going to have counselors and everything on campus. Is
Right.
great.
Yeah.
But,
Hey, yeah. And you know, as terrible as it is to, I pray for the man's soul. I don't know if he was a believer or not, but as terrible as it is to say that, I also pray always when I hear tragedies like that God may be able to use that in somebody else's life to bring them to Him. So, yeah, absolutely. All right. Pastor.
Our son Brandon in Texas is in the hospital. He's got pancreatitis with some complications with
Really?
it.
Okay. Okay.
Several days now.
Okay. All right. Let's remember Brandon. Bridget?
My cousin Michelle, she's having some issues with her liver.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Thanks for being here again. We'll see you. Yes, Terry. Okay.
Yeah, he had a stressful job, and he like now he was a workshop.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Juan works out at the prison, so it's yeah. How many more years has he got left, Terry, before retirement?
He needs to retire, but he doesn't want to.
All right. Okay, let's pray for Juan. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Brother Al, would you mind taking us out today?